public.
Oh no, just kidding.
No, we got to go public. So
I'm just kidding.
So we should be live now. We should be public. Hopefully, I know before I said this in my last podcast that the one previously I forgot to go live 45 minutes into it, so that was no good.
Oh, so we're good to go now, though. I
We're
see
good.
the live.
Okay, we're good. All right, so welcome to the podcast. This is Donn Felker. I'm sure a lot of you know him very well from his very popular podcast, Fragmented, and he's a lot of other things too. He's a freelance developer. He's a co-founder of Caster.io. It's a very popular learning platform. He's the author of a bunch of books, Android Development for Dummies. He's a speaker. He's a thought provoker on Twitter. And as far as I can tell, he's a cool guy.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
So I wanted to start with your story. How you've been around Android for a long time. Obviously, I looked up one of your books, Android Development for Dummies. It was written in 2010.
Mhm.
So at that point, you must have had some pretty good experience already. So let's talk about your story. How did you even begin programming? Never mind Android. Tell me about your high school life. How did you program in high school? Did you wait till university? Did you program at 8 years old? How did that happen?
So I'll start with this statement here. I didn't touch a computer till I was in my early 20s.
Oh wow. Okay.
I mean, except for the occasional, like, hey, here's a video game, and someone would show you the controls, and left, right, up, down. It was some race car game or something, but that was basically about it. But my background really is back in high school. I was heavily involved in like cabinet making, like a woodshop class.
Oh, so you're okay. So right away, I mean, that's a form of art. You're an artist. Let me just highlight that. You're a creative guy, and carry on.
So like that was half of it, and the other half of it was I used to race pro-am motocross for Suzuki.
Okay.
So I did like racing motocross for years, and long story short, I'm from Northern California, and I ended up in Phoenix, Arizona, because I was going to Motorcycle Mechanics Institute. I had broken a bunch of bones and determined that, hey, I'm not going to make it as a professional racer, but at least I can go wrench on the bikes and still be a part of it.
Or if you are going to make it, you're gonna make it in a very damaged fashion.
Exactly. Yes, very much so. I had the doctor say, hey, look, you have the choice of either continuing to do what you're doing now and have a lot of fun, or you can walk the rest of your life. Which one would you like to do?
Oh, what a great doctor. Wow.
So I chose the walking option, and so here we are. But at that time, I was at Motorcycle Mechanics Institute, going through the courses there, disassembling engines and being a mechanic and stuff. And then at one point, I had a girlfriend out in Phoenix, and she was getting ready, and she always took a really long time to get ready. And she said, "Hey,
Classic.
we're gonna go out. I'm gonna get ready." And I'm like, "Oh, I just got here." I'm like, "That's gonna be 2 hours. Like, what am I gonna do for 2 hours?" And she says, "Well, just get on the internet." And I said, "Well, what's the internet?" And this is probably around like 99ish and 1999. And she pulled up Alta Vista at the time, because Google wasn't around back then.
Alta Vista. What is that?
Alta Vista, the old
Alta Vista. Yeah, I don't even know what that is. Wow.
It's a really old search engine. Like, it's like backdates, I think, even Yahoo even.
Holy. Okay.
Yeah, so a long time ago. And so she asked me, she's like, "Hey, well, what do you want to know about?" And it was some band that I was listening to at the time. I'm like, "Well, what about this band?" And she just, typed it in the search engine, and boom, all of a sudden all this information came up. And I just kind of like did one of these. I'm like, "Get out of the way and let me look at this."
So your eyes started to light up. You thought it was incredible, pretty much is what happened.
Exactly. And 2 hours went by like this. I immediately knew whatever this thing was, the web at the time, I wanted to be a part of it. It was amazing to me. And so I kind of wrote a blog post about this whole story here. And to really kind of make it easy to understand is that learning the program ended up sucking really bad. So from someone who comes from a background that didn't have programming, it was difficult. So I immediately knew, like, I want to do this. And so I enrolled in a couple classes at college. And what I ended up finding out is it was just really difficult to learn to program. And folks that had been programming at a younger age just kind of naturally got it. And so I think we were doing a Java class, and this is like Microsoft's version of Java back then, which is really old. And I couldn't even get it to install. Like, you give you like 8 floppy disks, like the square ones, and I couldn't get it to install. It was a nightmare. And what I ended up doing, I finally got through that class, but I wanted to learn how to do web programming. I didn't have any money at the time. I was a broke college student. And so I went to Barnes and Noble, and I would read the book and bring a notepad, and I would copy down HTML code from Sam's Learn how to build a web page in 24 hours.
Man, you were determined. Holy shit. That, that's kind of amazing, actually. I can't imagine doing that right now. Like, if yeah, it just goes to show, like, right away you knew, like, this is the thing that you wanted to do, regardless of how difficult it was, regardless of how you didn't have money. You just wanted to do it. Wow.
Yeah, and so I did that for, a couple of weeks till I was able to, get a paycheck, and then I went out and bought the book. And then, of course, I started finding some small tutorials, and folks that have been around for a while probably remember WebMonkey, and that was a HTML tutorial site. And I kind of learned a lot of stuff from there. And long story short, ended up creating a web page, and just started creating web pages for everybody I knew, businesses, anybody else that needed them. I just wanted to be a part of it because I figured, hey, this is going to be something big in the future. And so I started with the web, and then that's actually my first programming language, you could call it, would actually have been JavaScript. Is when I learned how to do like an image mouse over to do to change the background of an image, and then it kind of went from there to working. I got a job at Target Corporation, which is the same
Target.
Yep, for the credit card division, and I wrote a bunch of scripts for them for these Unix dialers, and kind of learned on the job while I was going to college for software engineering. And then kind of progressed through the stages, and got a job working for Todd McFarlane, who's the creator of Spawn, the comic book. And, he drew Spider-Man for many years and created Venom and stuff like that. So I worked on Todd's team for 5 years, building his e-commerce platforms and all kinds of stuff like that. And then just kind of progressed throughout my career.
Wow, the way you talk, it makes you sound like you're like 60 years old or something. You've been around the block, but you look like a very young man. Like, you don't look much older than me, I don't think. But like, I mean, you don't have to say your age if you don't want to, but the experience that you have, it sounds like, wow. Like, I was 9 years old in 1999. So yeah. I think I got my first like dirty old PC when I was like 8, and it was my mom's. And I would just like go on those online chat rooms and play stupid games on it. Like, I didn't even know what programming was.
Yeah. So it's been a long road. But I ran into Android on accident in 2008. I was working at a consulting firm doing a bunch of .NET work. My wife had an opportunity to get a new phone from her. Your plan expires, you go buy a new phone. And the first Android device was coming out, the G1, and she said, "Hey, I'll get that," because they weren't making Sidekick devices anymore, which was basically, I think, Andy Rubin's old company. And so she got a G1, and the first application that I ever made for that was a application that used the accelerometer, and it was called Slap That. And what happened is you would swing the phone, and it would act like it would smack somebody. So really,
But make like a slapping noise.
Yeah, so if you swung it and stopped it at a certain velocity, it would make a slapping sound. Yeah, and so I recorded a bunch. I had a music sampler from some history I had in the music industry, and I sampled a bunch of music slap sounds, and that was the first app, and put a bunch of other small ones out there. So I had many apps out there in the first 1,000. This is back in the day when you would hit publish on the Android market, and you would see the application go live inside of the entertainment or info, whatever category it was. You just literally refresh it. It was at the top of the new releases.
And I'm sure there's no ratings. There's no like, are you allowed to check for this permission? Are you allowed to look here? Are you allowed to access this? It's just like a free for all, basically, right?
Yeah, it was like, we're going to use your internet permission. We're going to read all of your contacts. We're going to steal all of your data. We're going to do all this.
We're going to take it all. And if we feel like it, maybe we'll watch you log into your online banking. I don't know. We'll see what happens. That kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I got my started, and I actually learned all about Android programming just from reading the samples. The documentation was non-existent at the time, and one of the big influences I had was Foursquare, the company. Their first app on Android was open source. It was created by a guy named Joel LaPena. I think he works at Google now, and he created the Foursquare application, and it open sourced it on Google Code, I think it was. And I basically just downloaded that and just digested it end to end. Like, all right, well, how is he talking to an API? And I would just kind of walk through it and figure it out, and just kind of hacked my own stuff together.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. I think that's my favorite way. You definitely can't start doing that right off the bat, but now, like, my go-to if I ever want to learn something new is, number one, check Google samples. Check those. Those are really great. And then number two, look and see if you can find another, an example that somebody built, and then just, reverse engineer and see, oh, this is how they did this. This is how they did that. This is how they did that. And kind of say, does that make sense in my app? Does it not? But obviously as a beginner, that's not a practical thing to do. But, oh, that's a cool story. That's really cool. The thing I want to kind of backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
You mentioned your first. I mean, really, you started freelancing in college. You got, as soon as you were capable of building a simple website, you said you started to build them for people.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions for that I think my audience would be interested in knowing the answers to.
Yeah.
Number one is, how did you get these clients? Where did you meet these people at college? People you knew, or how did that go around?
It's a great question. And this kind of goes back to the age old saying of it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And I think that's something I've always tried to live by of, I may know 100 people, but if they don't know who I am, then it does me no good at all. And so I've always tried to let people know like, hey, here's how I can add value to, your life, your business, whatever. And so early on, when I was starting off with just HTML, I would end up, reaching out to, I'd run into people who had bands or whatever and say, hey, we've got a band. I say, oh, hey, you have a web page? Like, well, no, we don't. That'd be awesome. We don't know anyone knows how to do that. And so I was like, hey, well, I can make it for you. Like, I just want to put it on my portfolio. And so I do that. I would
So
just kind of,
free.
yeah, I'd build a bunch of them out for free. And then what ends up happening is I started building this large portfolio of websites. And then people would hear about it through conversations that, hanging out at dinner and meeting friends, so and so is associate, whatever. They're like, oh, I hear you do web pages. Yeah, I do. Oh, can I take a look? Yeah, here's some URLs. And then I'd give my email address or phone number or whatever. And all of a sudden, hey, yeah, we want a web page. How much would you charge us? And at that point, it was kind of a lot of fumbling around of like, all right, well, how much do I charge these people? And so that was kind of the early on incarnation of it. And then I kind of just continually started doing more and more in that. And it kind of changed as my career progressed a little bit.
Did you have so as my next question was going to be, how did you do the pricing, but you sort of answered that already. Start free, build up enough things so that next time, eventually when people start asking, you can give them URLs and say, oh yeah, I built this, I built this, I built this.
Yeah.
And once you have, it's leverage, you're building leverage. And then once you have that under your belt, you can start asking for money, because you can say, I built this. It's not my first rodeo here, kind of thing. So when you were eventually moving to do the pricing, because there was no YouTube, there was no online resources, there was no, how much does it cost to build an app? How much does it cost to build a website? There was no Craigslist, there was nothing. So how did you determine the pricing? Did you have a mentor of any kind? Did you have anything, basically?
No, back then I didn't. This kind of comes from the realm of like learning the program sucks, the blog post that I have about it. And I didn't really have any mentors or anyone I can rely on to like, hey, how much should this cost or anything? I would just start randomly throwing out random numbers. It's a really bad idea. Don't do that now. Ask some people. And so if it was like a website back in the day, I did a lot of Flash development, and a lot of music industry professionals, such as like Atlantic Records and so forth. I did a bunch of Flash sites for them, and it was like, well, how much would you charge? And I was like, I don't know. How does, and I didn't have any idea about pricing. I was like, how does $1,200 sound? It was a complete like deal for them. And they're like, yeah, sounds great. Let's do it. And
I'll pay cash right now.
Exactly. And so eventually I started moving in that direction of like, all right, well, everything was a fixed bid project. And the problem with that is unknowingly at the time is I didn't know how to manage the scope. Like, oh, hey, this has changed. I'm going to charge you additionally more. I felt bad at that time. And I think that's something that all of us suffer from, is like, we feel bad that we're going to say, hey, I want to charge $100 an hour. People feel really guilty of like, oh, I don't think I can do that. But that's something you kind of have to get over when you're working on your own. You have to be able to value your own time. And it probably wasn't until I kind of got into a real consulting job, kind of when I actually went, full time into a consulting position for a consulting company, where I saw how much they charge.
I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt you, but I was just about to say, you saw how much they charge. That like, that's the punchline. You see the consulting company was probably charging quadruple like 10 times what you were charging. So at that point you're like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of where it started. Is like, I'd worked at a consulting company. I saw they were billing me out at anywhere from 150 to 225 an hour. This is, we're going on 12, 13 years ago. They were charging that much. And I thought, whoa, okay, hold on. And so I started sitting down, running the numbers. And at that point in time, I had a friend who was working as a freelancer at another company. It's like, hey, we need some help. You're going to have expertise in this one area. Would you be interested in coming over? And that's kind of was like my first real test of saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to try some pricing here that to me seems really high. But if it fails, I'm not going to lose anything. I'm going to be in the same position I'm in now. I have low risk, so I'll just keep working my job if it doesn't work out. And I had an interview there. And like, hey, how much do you charge? And I said, well, $90 an hour. And and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, sounds good. And I was like, oh, too low,
Damn it.
Yeah,
Next time higher.
exactly. And so that's kind of been a walking a fine line throughout the rest of my career up to now of like, all right, well, how much am I going to charge? What's the value? Can I price on value? Can I keep bumping my rate up? And I've tried a couple of times to go really high end up to $300 an hour, and no one ever replies to that. There are companies that will, but those are going to be the quick, like 1 week engagements of like, all right, we need you to do X, Y, and Z, and we don't want to talk to you again because you're way too expensive. So it's kind of managing the risk of having a very short contract for a very high rate versus having lower risk, meaning for you're going to have a longer contract at a lower rate. So how long do you want to kind of shift those balances? Some people prefer to charge a lot of money and have very short contracts and kind of live in between them. Other people like to have more stability and charge less.
Me and something you said reminded me of the previous interview that I did with Vasily. You know Vasily, right? I think I see you talk to him on Twitter sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about renegotiating contracts. It's not an easy thing to do. Like and you started out, like you said, with set pricing. I think in general, like for all you guys who are thinking about freelancing or just doing any work in general, set pricing is not a good idea. Unless you have a cookie cutter thing that you've built 100 times and there's going to be no issues, there's going to be no scope changes. For those of you who don't know what scope changes mean, what that means, it means the customer coming up to you halfway through the project and saying, oh no, actually, I want to do it this way, or I want to add this thing. And it completely makes you trash what you've already done and you have to rebuild it basically. That's a scope change. So if you do a set price, that's bad. It's bad for you. It's going to make you angry. It's going to make you waste your time because you're not happy. You're going to give probably an inferior product. Not a good idea. But better idea seems to me is charge hourly.
Yeah, and I think I can add something on top of that that's really helped me out is to this day I avoid fixed bid projects, which is exactly what you're explaining. For that exact reason, because it can become problematic. But however, one time I was working with another company who I was billing underneath of, and they were kind of the middleman. They were the middleman. And I asked the recruiter of that company, that's kind of what they were calling him, but he kind of did sales too. I said, well, why are you doing this as a fixed bid? Like almost all companies lose on a fixed bid. And he goes, well, there's the key. He says, we start this as a fixed bid. He says, and anytime scope comes down, we'll make 1 or 2 changes. He says, as soon as continual scope creep comes in, he goes, we immediately shift this over to an hourly thing. He goes, so we use it actually as a way to open the door with the client, say, all right, yeah, we can do this app for 10, 15, 20, 30, whatever, thousands of dollars. And then what ends up happening is like usually ends up turning into a longer term engagement. And that's worked for me actually many times. I've had a client where I built an app for them for very cheap, for $10,000 when the app should have been a $50,000 app. And we just, really niched it down and it ended up turning into a contract that went over 9 months. And the first portion was, done in about 3 or 4 weeks, but, I was able to tack on an extra 8 months of just hourly work after that point, doing various different other things for them as well.
That sounds great. A hybrid system. That's what I would call that. And that sounds like the best. Yeah, the best of both worlds. Really, you get them in the door saying, I can build the thing that we've been talking about for this price, but if it changes, there's new costs, and then you iterate from there because it's fair. It's fair on both sides, really. And
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think the hard part too with the fixed bid project is a lot of clients come at you wanting everything in the kitchen sink. They say, we want X, Y, and Z, like everything. And you come back to them and say, like, look, this normally, these type of things are 50 to $250,000, like the kind of project you want. And so what I usually try to do is I'll try to talk to them as a business owner. Like, what are you trying to do with this application? Oh, we're trying to do, this particular thing in the realty market or whatever. Okay. And really get down to the core principle of what the app is trying to do. Like, all right, if we can very lean-esque, if anyone who's read the Lean Startup book,
good book.
Focus on exactly what the problem is. Let's go out and solve this and let's iterate on it. And so I'll solve that exact problem and basically remove everything else off of it. Let's solve this. If that works, let's iterate. And then what I'll do is when I'm giving them a bid, I'll say, hey, well, we can give this very niche down version and it's going to be X, which is substantially larger. versus the version that you really want, which is Y, and that one is, 10x. And then I'll maybe give them a couple of options in the middle, saying, here's kind of the range of the things we can do for the various different budget points. Where would you like to go? And then
So this, sorry, I didn't mean
go
to
ahead.
interrupt you. I was just going to say, so what you're doing right now, what you're explaining is what I think differentiates a really who will be a very successful freelancer to someone who will be an average freelancer if skill is the same. So two people, skills the same. One person is able to basically take the client, what the client is saying, and bring it into real life, as opposed to just taking what the client is saying and just kind of trying to do it without really it's a skill that you take it because they don't know what's possible and what isn't. There are people who probably don't know what code is. Maybe they barely know how to send an email, like they don't know how the internet works. They don't know how the web works. They don't know anything. So taking what their idea and bring it into the realm of possibility, breaking down the problem, saying this is actually what you want to do. Not all of these things. You actually want this thing. So I can do this thing for this price, as opposed to unknown jumble of mess that you will pay a lot for and probably won't do what you want to anyway. So yeah, that's a good skill. That's a skill all of you should develop. Ask Donn Felker. So how do you get clients these days? Now that you're you're an Android celebrity, how does Donn Felker get clients?
It's the same as it was 10 years ago. And so here's how this is what's worked for me. And I want to put that out there. Is like, this is what works for me. It doesn't mean it's going to work for you. A lot of people out there in the industry will say, if you follow this blueprint, then you'll have this level of success. I can't guarantee that. Nobody can guarantee that. And I think it's a bunch of nonsense, really, because everyone's different, has different background, have a different network, different experiences. So what I'm telling you now is just my experience, and hopefully you can pick and pull from it to use the things to help, make some changes in your life if you're looking to go this direction. So with that said, for me, the number one biggest thing that has changed my career has been public speaking, hands down. And here's why I say this, and I tell this to people all the time. And as we all know, public speaking is basically some people fear public speaking more than they fear death. And that's the truth. I can believe that.
I was gonna say, sorry, I was worried I was gonna interrupt you, but I wanted to say something. I was gonna say, shout out to Florian, who's in the chat right now, coding and flow. Just learn to public speak, bud. It'll change your life. You're pale, but we want to see you. Everybody wants to see you. It's okay. You're allowed to stumble around sometimes. You can fart on camera. That's allowed.
No more green logo, Florian. No more green logo.
Show us your face, Florian. Show us your face.
Exactly.
Sorry. Okay. So now what were you saying?
No. So the public speaking thing, that's basically what kind of kicked everything off. So there's a few things. Public speaking, get out there in front of people. And the reason why you want to do that is because instantaneously, as soon as you're on a stage, regardless if you feel this way or not, you're automatically considered an authority. It's just a natural psychological thing. Even if you're talking about something that you're only 30-40% sure about, you're considered an authority out there. And what has worked for me very well is just continually speak. I've kind of throughout the years always tried to speak 4 or 5 times a year. And of course, there's been years where I've spoken a lot more. So that on top of also blogging. And initially, very early on, I tried to put out 1 blog a week of technical content. And this could be even just very something I've done. Perhaps I'm doing with Android. Here's how you work with intent flags, just something simple. Or maybe it was, and this one works very well, a very long tail keyword approach is, let's say and this happened to you, I'm sure, you get an error when you're developing something and you can't find anything on Google for it. You're like, this is like non-existent. No one's ever run into this or posted it. Once I figure out what the solution is, I will take that exact error and make that the title of the blog post, or how to fix blah, blah, blah.
That's smart. You're like shortcutting Stack Overflow.
Yes,
it's like,
totally.
That's because that's what Stack Overflow is. You're taking their traffic, basically.
Yeah. And so you put that also in your content, the body of your post. And then of course you explain how to do it, very as eloquently as you can and succinctly as you can. And so you're doing your blog maybe once a week, you're doing public speaking, 4 to 5, 6 times a year. And people get freaked out when I say public speaking, like, I'm not ready to go speak at a big conference. Like, no, you don't have to go do that at all. Go look up your local GDG or Google developer group. Go look up your local Android meetups. Go look up anything like that. It doesn't matter if you're in front of 2, 3, 4, 5 people. Go in there with a goal to help one person. because you may go in there and say, hey, here's how I did this thing, or here's why this is important. And maybe the majority of people are like, okay, that doesn't really apply to me. But that one person that you influenced, it may not do anything right now. And here's how this works. 2-3 years down the road, all of a sudden, this person's at a new company. They're working on a new project. They're doing something like, oh, you know what? I've been following Don for a long time. He was talking about this thing about a year ago.
Yeah, the long
Let's
tail.
yeah, let's get a hold. Let me get a hold of him, see if he can help us out. I can't tell you how many contracts have come down the line just because of those simple things. Either they've seen me speak somewhere, or they started following me somewhere, and it's all just kind of happened serendipitously over the course of time, being in front of the various different public outlets.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Even, me just speaking about my own life. I where I live, I'm thinking about, we only have 2 bedrooms in the place where we're living. We're thinking about having a kid next year. Obviously, that doesn't make sense. I can't have this and have a kid in here. That doesn't work.
No, it
So,
doesn't.
so now I'm thinking, I'm thinking, where am I going to have this studio? Well, we have a really big garage, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe I can convert that into a studio. And now I'm thinking, okay, who could do that for me? And instantly, I'm not looking in Craigslist. I'm not
Yeah.
looking for anything. I'm like, who do I know who's a carpenter? Who do I know who I know has done this sort of thing before? And I'm calling him up, and he's going to come over and give me a quote. And it's the same sort of thing. I happen to know somebody in the industry, and that's the guy I'm going to go to.
Yeah,
So,
there's a saying out there that I think goes something like, the best known will always beat the best out there. So even if you're the best at Android development, and I am by far not the best Android developer in the world, I know that there are many, many more people that are better than me. But if you are more known than these other people, you are going to get more traffic to you on your own personal brand.
mhm. I also too, I just thought of something as a kind of a hack for those of you who maybe want to start public speaking, but you don't want to get on YouTube, or you don't want to go to a Android specific meetup because you're scared maybe there's some experts there who will make you seem dumb. I don't know, whatever. What you could do is look up a meetup, like an entrepreneur meetup.
Yep.
It'll be something where there's no technical people, there's very few technical people, and just go there and talk about how the web works, talk about how apps work, talk about pricing, talk about whatever. Just try and give them information that I'm sure they've thought about. Everybody has app ideas, especially if you're a small business owner. You've thought about improving your website or doing this thing, and you're not really sure how it works, whatever.
Yeah.
You can use your technical knowledge, get on stage, explain it, and say, thanks, my name's Mitch. I'll be sitting over there. And like, that's it.
That's a great way to, get the public speaking experience. That's fantastic, because you're just going to grow that way, but also to find additional clients, because like you said, those people don't know that you're not some, big speaker or whatever, but you've got up there in front of them. You are now an authority on that topic. And so they're say, hey, you know what? I actually need an app, or, hey, I don't need one. My buddy owns some company, office supply company, blah, blah, blah. They need an app, hey, can I connect you to? And that's kind of how these things slowly start happening.
Yeah, I think these are all great. Like, that's what I was honestly, that's what I was going to do before the podcast. Like that, I knew that so well because that was what I was thinking. I was like, I wasn't really sure if I was ready for public speaking. I knew I wasn't ready to get in front of 100 people who were technical experts. That's for damn sure. But getting in front of a small room full of people, 20 people who don't know shit about the internet, I can get up there and I can rock that. That's for damn sure.
I
But
think it's, what you said was important though. Like, a lot of people are afraid to get up there because, there's experts out there and there's people that are going to know more than I am. The best piece of advice I can give here is something someone by the name of Jason Bach gave me. And this is the guy I used to work with. He told me, he says, look, he says, there's always going to be someone out there that knows more than you every single time. He said, just expect it. Most likely they're going to try to ask a question and try to derail you. He says, that's okay. Just, if they say something to you, or they ask you a question and you don't know the answer, or even if a general person does, hey, how does blah, blah, blah work? And you don't know, that's okay. Just say, you know what? I don't know that right now.
definitely don't lie.
Yeah, I don't know that right now, but follow up with me after the talk. I'll get your email. I'll figure it out, and I'll get back to you and I'll help you with that problem. Then what
Yeah.
that does, it builds rapport with the crowd, and say, hey, this guy is not some, know-it-all. He actually is willing to help out and, be humble about what he does know.
I used to be very uncomfortable when people asked me something I didn't know. Very uncomfortable. I would, I don't even remember what I used to do, but now I'm very comfortable with saying, don't know. I just
Yeah.
flat out, I don't know anything about that topic. So I can't give you an answer. I'll Google it for you, but you might as well do it. You might as well do it yourself.
Yeah, don't know.
Yeah. So now we've talked about freelancing. We've talked about clients. We've talked about how to get clients, how to price. The best way to pricing, just to reflect, is probably start with a set price for what they're asking. And then say if there's any scope changes, move to an hourly rate. That seems to be the best way that I've heard before. We'll call it the Donn Felker.
I don't know about that. So, I mean, one thing I think that's important there is with pricing nowadays is there's a lot of folks that are out there. It depends on where you're at in the world. For folks that are in the United States, if you do have a bit of experience, I don't recommend people going under $100 an hour, just simply because there's so much stuff out there. If you still don't feel comfortable, okay, maybe start at 75 if you're there. But what you'll soon realize is that you can actually charge more as you kind of move up the ranks pretty quickly.
Yeah, makes sense. So now I want to transition a little bit here from away from freelancing.
Yeah.
And normally I'd go into a different topic, but let's take a look at what the chat's saying. Usually I wait till the end to take a look at what the chat's saying, and then I'm kind of panicking to get all the questions answered. So let's see if we can cherry pick some questions that a lot of people might benefit from.
For sure.
So the first one that pops up is from Pemba. Pemba always watches my live streams. He always watches my videos. He talks to me on Instagram. I know this guy. He's like a regular. So Pemba, thanks for joining us again. He asks, what are your thoughts on Flutter?
It's a good question. I recently wrote a blog post about Flutter, and what I ended up talking about in the blog post is
Wait. Let's tell them the URL so they can find it.
You can go. It's at donfelker.com. It's going to be at the top, and I'd have to double check. I think it's I have to double check the exact URL, but it's at donfelker.com. It's with the last one or two blog posts that are up there. So to kind of recap here, on the blog post, I talked about some of the technologies we've tried previously, which is, kind of the Cordova stuff. PhoneGap kind of doesn't work that well. We've had React Native. It's kind of really kind of pushed the boundaries of what's possible, and is really close to something that we could use, especially with the number of JavaScript developers there are. Kotlin native, I'll talk about in a second. And then of course, there's, Xamarin. Xamarin works okay, but then again, you have to kind of learn C# and, what ends up having to learn actually both platforms. Like, all right, am I using an Android view? Am I using an iOS view, etc.? And then you have Kotlin native. Kotlin native is still kind of coming up. It's very popular in the Android community, but anytime you step out of the Android community, it's just, no one even knows what it is. And that's just kind of a sad thing, but it is what it is. And that's kind of the situation I'm finding with Kotlin native. Now, if you take a look at Flutter, what you'll see is there's a whole different community of Flutter. There's like Flutter experts. There's, Flutter GDEs that aren't GDEs and anything else. And you may have not even seen these people's names because they're just experts in Flutter. There's a huge community. There's a bunch of packages for Dart you can use. And so do I think it's the end all be all? No, but I think it's something you should definitely evaluate, simply because there's some applications out there that are a perfect use for it. If it's forms over data, and you don't need any fancy platform specific things, like, I don't need slices in Android, or I don't need all these 10 different things where I have to do platform specific changes. It makes it much easier to just develop that single application, which there's a lot of companies out there that do that. Now, of course, there's going to be caveats. Is it a game? Are you doing a bunch of media playback and manipulation and stuff like that? Though there are being advancements made in that area too. So I am very bullish on it. I'm looking forward to see what happens. I'm actually currently writing a couple of applications for myself that are in Flutter, simply because I like it. I think the language is, as I think it was Matt Sullivan from the Flutter team said, Dart is not a super exciting language. It's kind of boring and mundane, but it does its job very well. I think I could definitely get behind that. And then the reactive kind of architecture. If you've ever used anything like React, as soon as you hop into Flutter, you kind of feel very at home. Like, oh, I kind of feel like I've done this before. And that whole paradigm starts to make sense. So if you've seen the stuff with Swift UI and Jetpack Compose similarity stuff come out, it's very similar to a lot of those reactive style things come out. So again, very bullish on it. We'll see where it goes. It's not a solution for everything, but it's something I would evaluate for everything.
Yeah, actually, I've been watching it obviously because if something takes off, I want to be the guy who learns it and teaches other people as quickly as possible. Obviously, because that's what I do.
Yep.
I've been watching it, but I've been hesitant to really get into it. Your blog post actually definitely pushed the needle in the other direction. After I read it, I thought, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. It sounds like it's doing some good stuff, and it definitely pushed me towards like, okay, maybe I'm going to start taking a look at Flutter stuff slowly.
Yeah.
But yeah, for now, like Kotlin to me is going to be my focus. But yeah, soon, who knows? 6 months, you might see me making a Flutter course. I don't know.
Yeah, it's possible. I've seen a couple of I think there's like flutterjobs.info. That's one place that I like to watch the job sites for new technologies and see like what's coming out. And I did this early on with Node.js. I said, well, Node came out, everyone was super hyped about it, but Rails was kind of the dream child at the time. And all of a sudden Node started taking off. And I just started watching the job sites and I was just seeing more and more and more Node jobs come available. So it's always kind of been a good litmus test for me to see is if there's jobs out there for it, that means that there's demand for it. So let me kind of keep an eye on that at all times.
Right. That's a good way to do it. The job boards. So the next, and coming over here to the chat is next guy says, I know he wrote a book on Android development. Is he the owner of Caster.io? You are the co-owner, I believe, right?
Single founder. That's me.
Oh, single founder. I thought you were. Oh, I messed up the intro. Then I thought you were. I don't know who the co-founder was, but I thought you were a co-founder. So you're the owner. You're the founder.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yes, correct. Yeah, owner of Caster.io.
Do you still make courses?
Yes, I do make courses. I'm in the middle of a very long course right now on Flutter. I'm assuming not Flutter. More to think about the last
Flutter on your mind, yeah.
No, a very long introduction to programming course on Kotlin. So many lessons into it are right now. The whole plan is to release that. The whole thing will be free for anyone who wants to learn Kotlin. Can kind of come in and learn Kotlin from the ground up for this course. So
cool.
There's that.
I'm going to send traffic your way because I personally don't like beginner stuff. I hate making beginner courses. I like to just it's hard and it's boring, and you have to explain the things that you don't like to explain, but beginners they got to see the big picture. They got to know why you wrote it that way and not that way, and that way and not that way, and
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I had one video was on truth tables. Like, because I'm sitting there talking about different Boolean values. I'm like, wait, if you don't know these Boolean values, like you kind of have to understand the root, how truth tables work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually had a video on like, hey, here's a truth table. And if we have these different values, here's how it works. So I agree. And I've actually seen Florian talk about this online. We were just talking about him before.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's difficult making beginner content because you don't, after you're in kind of the machine for a while, you don't even think about these basic concepts. They're just second nature to you. And so when you take a step out of the box and you kind of examine it from the outside perspective, you think like, wow, if I didn't know this, I would have no idea why it's doing that. And so you have to explain all those root level things as you
explain. So yeah, like I said, my next course is going to be Kotlin. Probably moving forward now, I'm stepping away from Java and I'm going to be doing pretty much all Kotlin. Cool. I don't have any beginner courses, so I'm going to send people your way.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
If people are watching my my new Kotlin projects, I'm going to say, hey, if you don't understand this, go check out Donn Felker's free course on Caster.io where you can learn Kotlin for beginners.
That's right, man. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's see, woodworking, engineering. That wasn't really a question. Mitch, you are a baby. Yes, I know. Don is he's like a wise old man. Let's see. What is your main no list as a freelancer? Kotlin, PHP, Laravel. Okay, so I guess. Okay, that's a good question. What's most of your freelance work in?
Right now, the majority of my freelance work is in Android, and that's simply because of I have a following in the Android community, and the podcast is a huge driver of that. So the majority of it's going to be Android, and it's going to be in Kotlin. I probably say I touch Java maybe 10 to 15% of my day, if that. And even as I approach that, I just convert it to Kotlin if possible, if it's not too much of a big deal or the file's not too big and there's too many changes. Other than that, I kind of I'll have my hands inside of HTML, CSS, Ruby, Rails every day, and then of course JavaScript, sometimes Node, sometimes Python.
So the Ruby, that's freelance work or that's your personal stuff?
Caster.io is built completely on Rails. So It's a Rails app. And so on top of everything I've always done, I've always considered myself a builder. And I've always had my foot in the camp of, you could say, entrepreneur, as I'm always trying to build businesses on the side to generate passive income. Years ago, I built some gym management software for small gyms. And that was all in Rails. And that's a whole other story there. And I've continued to build these businesses, web-based businesses on Rails, just for simply because it's easy to do. And that's kind of what Caster's on. So that's why I'm writing Rails and Ruby.
Use Django? You ever use Django?
I've used it. It's probably been like 6-7 years since I've used it though.
Is it I've never used Rails, so I'm asking for personal. It's a selfish ask. Is it similar? Because I know they're both powerful. They both get a lot done very quickly, kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do they compare?
I have vastly more experience with Rails than Django, and in my experience, and I could be wrong here, so I'm going to disclaimer that it's just way more convention inside of Rails. There's a lot more built in there for just the developer experience of like, all right, you want to get this app up and running. Boom, you can just fire up a new Rails app. Oh, you need this. It's inside of this gem. You can kind of pull this in. Oh, you need to do this. Okay, cool. There's authentication. Just throw in devise. And just the community is there to just really scaffold up a web app very quickly. I know a lot of Django has a lot of that stuff. It just feels that Rails to me is much more organized and kind of gets you out the door a little bit faster.
Yeah, I mean, when you were just describing that, it sounds like Django. That's Django. It's like, oh, you need authentication? Here you go. Oh, you need forms? Here you go.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you need email stuff? Here you go. I don't know. Sounds similar. I'm sure their setup process is different.
Yep.
And what I will say as a caveat with Django, I like it because it's what I use.
Yep.
But I would say the documentation is difficult. It's hard. Like I'm assuming that's what you mean by it's Rails appears. It sounds like you're saying Rails appears more clear, more easy to use, maybe more intuitive. And Django can be definitely not intuitive, I would think.
Yeah, there's also another aspect that I don't talk about much of why I choose certain languages, such as Rails and JavaScript. And that's mainly because I know eventually I can't run everything. I can't develop everything myself. So I'm going to have to find help. And I do. I have right now multiple developers that work for me on Caster.io and other projects that I have, and I have to hire them. And so I need to make sure it's something that I can go find easily. And Rails, I can find developers all over the world. And same thing probably for Django, but it was really easy to find Rails because they're very popular. Same thing for JavaScript developers and so forth. And this kind of goes back even to the cross-platform thing with Flutter that we talked about for a second. I used to do Xamarin development, and I built my own Xamarin apps that I had. I put them for sale. They were some fitness applications. I was making a good income off of them. And then I couldn't manage the development anymore because I needed to manage the business. And so I went to go find Xamarin developers, and they were just unbelievably expensive, like $130 an hour. And the app wasn't making enough to sustain that level of development. And so I actually went and found an iOS developer to rewrite the app in iOS. And I just wrote the Android version myself just so I could get lower costs because it was just the prices were lower.
It's that niche language. That's why they're able to charge so much.
It's exactly what it was. Yep.
Yeah, just simple supply and demand. There wasn't a lot of Xamarin developers. Xamarin seems to be dying now. Like you don't see okay, sorry, I didn't mean to use a buzzword, dying, but it seems to be decaying. That might be a better word.
It's interesting. Sort of depends on where you go in the various parts of the world. Like for example, in the Midwest of the United States, Xamarin is everywhere. Like big companies that I won't name, that I have friends working there that they're using Xamarin, and a lot of apps that you see out there, they're Xamarin apps. And so it just depends on where you're at. If you go on San Francisco, New York, no, you're not going to see Xamarin. But for me, I've seen just a lot in the Midwest of the United States for some reason.
So it's like a redneck language.
I have no idea. I didn't say it.
I don't know. I get what you're saying. Okay.
No, there's just a lot of Microsoft companies in the Midwest, actually, just a big Microsoft community. And so it just it's a natural extension. Just like for Kotlin folks, they want to go Kotlin multi-platform. Like they want to use what they already know. Everybody's happy to use what they're familiar with.
Right. That makes sense. All right, let's find another question. Then we're going to talk about some other stuff here. Mostly just statements. Coming down. Talking about Florian. All right, I'm going to skip a whole bunch. Okay, here we go. We got some more. Don is outstanding. Really good tips. From it's Vasily. Hey, Vasily. Thanks for joining us. Don, how do you manage your day-to-day time? I know you are a productivity beast.
Great question. Yeah. So I was just having this conversation this morning. I was at the gym at 6 this morning, and I was having a conversation with this guy who's a high school teacher. and we were having a conversation about kids. I have 2 younger kids, and I said, you know what? My friend just had a kid, and I tell everyone who's either going to have kids or just about to. I said that there's life before kids, and there's life after kids, and there's that demarcation line, and that's it. You can't move that line. That is what it is. And it's a completely different life. And those that are parents on this call or live or watching this later are probably nodding their heads in agreement, like, oh yeah, life's way different after you have kids. And so in having kids, it actually helped me realize how much time I had been wasting. And one of the things I always say to myself is like, I wish I could go back in time and punch myself in the face every single time I said I'm bored, because there's no time for me to be bored anymore just because of kids and everything else.
So I have so I have a thought on this. I think there's many parts in your life where you have this same experience. This just happens to be the one that sticks in your mind. Like I remember when I was 8 years old and I was laying around my house just like bored. Oh, what do I do? Nothing to do. Absolutely nothing to do. And then when I was 12, I thought back, man, how was I so bored? Why didn't I just do this?
Mm-hmm.
And then, uh, high school started and I looked back to when I was 12 and I thought, wow, why didn't I, learn how to do this? That would have really helped me. Or why didn't I try harder in football? Or, damn, that's
Mm-hmm.
stupid. And then I went to university and I thought, wow, I wish I would have actually done stuff in high school instead of just screwed around. This would have been way easier. And I think that, and now the most recent one is I just got married, and people keep telling me that there's life before married and life after married, and to me, I'm thinking it's going to be the same. But I'm sure there's going to be another moment, and then we're going to have kids, and there's going to be another moment. So I think these things inevitably this just happens. Hindsight is 2020. I mean, do the best you can. That's what I think.
Yeah,
but
I've been married, of course, so I have it's definitely different after you get married, but I'm firm on the belief that there's no greater, delineation between before and after of when you have kids. Like, it's just it's something you can't even explain, because you try to explain it, people are like, oh yeah, cool, I have a dog. Like, that's not a dog's not even the same thing at all. No, not at all. So anyway, to go back to the productivity thing, I try to organize my entire day from start to finish. And so my day basically starts at 4:30 in the morning and ends around either from like 9 to 10, kind of in that area. It depends on if I'm really tired, I'll go to bed earlier. So 4:30 in the morning, I wake up, and immediately the first thing I do is tea. I try not to drink coffee. I drink tea, and then I'll meditate for 10 minutes, and then I journal. And in that journal, I write down like high level goals that I would like to accomplish in the next 5 to 10 years. And I write those every single day. And then I have a target list of, here's all the things I'd like to get done for today. And it might be 20 things, like, hey, and it includes mundane things like, get the kids ready for school, make lunches, go to the dentist, work out, read 10 pages of a book. And then down at the bottom of that, I follow what's known as the power list kind of protocol. And that's by Andy Frisella. And if you put down 5 things that you have to accomplish today that are going to help drive you forward in your life, and they're going to be, could be habit building, they could be business building, but they're going to be 5 things. If you get those 5 things done in that day, the day is considered a win. And so they need to be something you can accomplish in the day. And one of them might be like, hey, I'm trying to, learn how to meditate. Like, okay, one of them is meditation. Cool. And if I do that, I can check it off. Another one is I want to read 10 pages a day. Okay, check that off. And the next one might be, hey, call these 5 people regarding these, the sales thing or whatever. Another one might be submit a PR to something. Cool. And if I get those things done, it's a W, it's a win. If I don't get them done, then it's an L, that's a loss. And the goal is to just get as many W's as you can during the year. And it's just a natural driver. So once I'm done with that, I try to use that next period of time. Either I'll read 10 pages, and then up till about 7 in the morning, it's just pure creative work. That could be anything that's going to be coding. It could be writing. It could be recording or editing or anything like that. But it's usually all creative work, because I find for myself early in the morning, it's much easier to be creative, because at night I'm just tapped out. My brain is just done. I don't have the energy. I have tons of decision fatigue that's already set in, and I'm making poor decisions. And then around 7 to 8, kids are up. And then they're usually out of the house by 8:30, 8:45. And then I go to the gym usually from about 8:45 to like 9:45-ish. And then it's kind of hop in and just start cranking through tasks at that point in time. It's either going to be client work or working on my own projects if there's no client work to do. And then right around 5 to 6 o'clock, I'll kind of wrap that up, head home, do dinner with the family, hang out for a little bit, and then help get the kids to bed. And usually that's between like 8 or 9, about 8ish o'clock. And then it's just focus on additional things I need to get done that time. Off to bed by about 9 o'clock in the morning. About 9:30 at night.
Where do you work? You mentioned you drive home. Do you have like you have an office? Do you have a work share or whatever you call them?
Oh, co-working. Yeah.
Co-working,
Uh,
yeah.
so I have a home office. That's not where I'm at right now. I'm actually in an office outside of my home. Wife, she stays at home with the kids, and so she's kind of stay home, takes care of the house and so forth. And so I found, and we have dogs, and I do a lot of recording as yourself. And as you know, any type of noise that just sounds off in the back can ruin your video. And so I ended up just getting an office outside of my house, about 15 minutes away from my house, which is great because it actually allows me to come into an office. It's a small basement office for one person, and I'll come in here and kind of get some work done. I got the audio foam up on the wall and so forth.
Yeah, I've thought about doing something similar. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this live stream, I was thinking about renovating our garage and turning that into an office. I've also thought about, going and just renting some simple office space. I think that, driving to work and going somewhere specifically to do work it has a mental effect too.
Hmm.
Like you go there to work as opposed to working at home. It's
Hmm.
I think there's an effect there that's not negligible.
Yeah, I also use that time to consume like copious amounts of audiobooks. I'll just more books than I can keep track of. Over the last few years, I've just read just tons and tons and listened to tons and tons, and so it's been a big help. But what you said there is it actually helps me psychologically, because when I lived in Arizona years back, I was working remotely from home in my home office, and then at one point I had to fly out to San Francisco for a client, and I left and I was driving down the freeway, and I look over the side of the freeway and I said, where did that office building come from? It was a brand new office building. It had before it was just empty desert. It had built, it was, fully fleshed out. Parking lot was there, and there was where people were working in it. And then I realized I kind of backtracked. I'm like, wow, I hadn't left a 3 or 4 mile radius of my house in close to 6 months.
Sounds like me.
And I was like, whoa, I haven't left like real. That's been like my world over here for like 6 months. Like I have to get out of the house, and that was the impetus of me getting an office in Arizona. Now, since then, I've had one out here in New
Man,
Zealand too.
now you're making me think. Maybe I shouldn't build this home office. Like practically speaking, it makes total sense, right? Because my wife and we share a car because I don't go anywhere. She's a nurse. She drives to work, and I have no need for a car other than going to the gym, which we do together.
Mhm.
And so I thought, oh, I'll build a home office. It'll be great. I won't have to drive anywhere. But yeah, I think having an office just to go to would be a positive thing, having somewhere to go, getting out of the house. It's not practically speaking, here is better because it's less money. I'd have to buy a
Yeah.
car.
Mhm.
I'd have to reno it. But yeah, I don't know,
Yeah, it's and that does change once you do have children too, because you do need like every once in a while you get cabin fever. You have to get out of the house, and that's definitely something I've suffered from many times of just sitting there. And I've seen various different posts on 37 Signals or Signal versus Noise, their blog from the Basecamp folks about, hey, if you're working remote, you have to sometimes just get out of your location, and that's kind of one of the hacks that I use actually. Even now that I have an office, is I do location based tasks or task-based locations, depends on how you want to say it. But the short of it is I'll have a task to do, and maybe it's like, hey, I need to submit this PR and it's going to be a couple hours of work. I'll go to a coffee shop, Starbucks, one get whatever. And then I go there for the specific intention of just getting that task done. And then as soon as that task is done, I might buy a coffee or whatever. I'll get that task done. I'll wrap it up and then I'll go somewhere new. Could be a library, could be some other, open restaurant area. I'll go there with another task, and then I'll jump 3 or 4 places throughout the day just so I can end up somewhere new, which then ends up sparking creativity just because you're in a new environment. It has a psychological effect on you.
that's a great hack. I've never thought about it, but like intuitively, I think that would be effective.
Oh,
Like I
it's very
think,
effective.
yeah, I think just bouncing around. It's because you go to a place, get the job done, job's done, next place, and you're
Mhm.
you're you're very like, it's a very focused, and yeah. I think that would be very good. I think that would be good.
Yeah, because how many times have you been somewhere and you'll be working and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, where did those 3 or 4 hours go? Like,
Hmm.
wow, why can't I get that focused at home? Or why can't I get that focused at the office? And this is why people say all the time, like, oh, I'm so much more focused at home, because you're never there. Because as soon as you get there, it's a different environment. So after you've been working at home for a while, like, you can kind of go a little bit crazy, and it's good to change up your environment, in my opinion, because then it can reignite some of that creativity that has kind of been stagnated by the familiar surroundings that you're stuck within all the time.
That makes sense. That makes sense. You've I'm gonna have to think about my office thing now. Like, yeah, I got some thinking to do. I got
Well, at least you can always evaluate it too. You can always find a place that you can either sublet, and you can get a hold of them, look on Craigslist, where say, hey, they have an office space. Like, hey, can I sublet that from you for 3 months? And just give it a shot to see if you like it or not. And then you're
I've
not
already
committed.
looked into it.
See, all right. Preaching to the choir.
I've already looked into it because I thought about this, but yeah, we'll see. What I think might end up happening is realistically, if we try to have kids next year,
Mhm.
there won't be any kind of kid factor really for like 3 years from now,
Okay.
until there's like a little guy running around or girl.
Mhm.
And if I had a home office, that's when it would start to get annoying because
Mhm.
I'd be distracted by the kid. So I think maybe if I rent out the garage, I built the home office, even if that lasted 3 to 4 years before I said, okay, I got to get out of the house, it's probably still a worthwhile investment compared to leasing something for 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
So that's likely what will end up happening, I think.
Yeah.
Seems practical. All right. So that was a long question. That was a long answer, but some good productivity hacks there. Now we have another question from Vasily. Does Don have any serious live apps? I don't know okay, so he's going to explain himself. I mean, apps that have substantial user base. Wish he would have defined substantial, but any tips for indie developers? So before you answer that, I would like you to define what substantial user base means. Um, yeah. So what would you say to that?
For me, what substantial is?
No, no, yeah. So before you explain any apps that you got out there, any apps that you're working on, if you don't mind sharing how many users they have, anyway.
Yeah, all of my app. I'll be honest. All of my apps I've since removed off the Play Store. All of my apps that I'm part of at this point are all through clients. Substantial. When I hear substantial, in my opinion, substantial is 5 million plus users.
Okay. And so do you know how many users your clients have, like, for their apps, or is that not information you are able to see?
Some I can share, some I cannot. Of some of the fitness apps that I've been a part of in the past, those have been in the 70 million plus range.
Wow. Jesus.
Um, yeah, it's insane. And that's I did a talk called Android from the Trenches, where I learned a lot about Android in general from working at these companies, where it's amazing the types of crashes you get at that scale. Um,
Yeah, just the volume of people. That's insane. I didn't think as a freelancer you would ever get traffic like that on
well, it's
apps that
not
you're
my
working on.
yeah, they're not my apps. I mean, they're
No, no, I
client
mean,
apps. Yeah.
still though, it's an
Mhm.
app that you're working on as a freelancer. I didn't think a freelancer would any app you work on as a freelancer would get that kind of traffic.
Yeah.
Like that's insane.
Yeah. So it's again, this goes back to what you can add value to for the team. If you're an expert in dependency injection, and for some reason this client app they need a dependency injection expert, you might come in and implement that, and that could be, you could be working on the next Uber style app of whatever, and that could have a huge install base. And I've been very lucky to work at some of these companies that have had that, and then other ones, that are ranging from a few 100,000, which these are still very active apps. Um,
Oh yeah,
so
nothing wrong with
yeah,
100,000 users.
no, not at all. Um, it just depends on kind of what they're doing with the application. How, what's the DAU, the daily active users? How often are they opening the app? Like, for example, when I was at MyFitnessPal, that's an application. When you're using it, you're tracking your calorie intake and all the food you eat. You're opening it multiple times a day. Now, as with maybe let's say you're doing a budget app, like, you're not going to open it multiple times. And you might if you're just budgeting it multiple times a day, but you might just open it once every other day or something like that. It's not going to be as active. And the same thing for when I was at Groupon. Like, some people would look at deals a couple of times a day. Other people would just look once a week. Just really depends on what the app's used for.
So I heard you earlier mention that you were working on fitness apps, but just now you said you were working on MyFitnessPal.
Yeah.
So you were one of the you were a freelancer working on MyFitnessPal, or you worked for the company?
Yeah, so I worked freelance for MyFitnessPal early on. This is before they took investment from all their investors and got acquired. It was a fun time. We had taken the app over. I had a friend of mine, Eric, who brought me on. We worked together at Groupon. He went over to MyFitnessPal, and they had the company that had built it was in Kenya. It was a Kenyan like contracting company that built the Android version, and we kind of brought it over. And at that point in time, we needed to bring it up to date. It was one of those apps that look like it's an Android app that look like an iOS app. Have you ever seen one of those before? Like all the buttons look like an iOS app
I
back
can't
in the.
I can't think of one. I can't think of one because I always had an iPhone until I started developing with Android. So yeah,
Okay.
I just don't know.
So back in the day in 2000, between 2008 and 2013, even there was a lot of companies that would say, "Hey, I have an iPhone app, and I want you to make the Android version because you're an Android guy." I said, "Okay, well, what do you like? What do you want it to look like?" And like, "I want it to look just like the iPhone app." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I can make it look Android style iPhone." Like, no, 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 just like the iPhone app. We want the back arrow. We want like all
Oh,
the
yikes.
iPhone things. Yeah. So
Doesn't
what
even
would
make sense, really.
what ended up happening is a lot of folks would not put their foot down and say, "Hey, we're not doing that because that's not the proper way to do things." And even back then, there wasn't really much guidance. And so a lot of folks and developers, contractors would just copy the iPhone version pixel for pixel. And that's what happened at MyFitnessPal. We ended up taking it and then kind of making it proper Android. And then that's an interesting, you know, that company and fitness in general is a very interesting area because it's very cyclic. At the beginning of the year, you get a ton of new users because
Mhm.
everyone's going on diets. They're going to start doing fitness, and so there's this huge peak of users that you get every year. So it just skyrockets, and then slowly tapers down, and it skyrockets, and it's just kind of like this jagged step upwards of user base.
The old New Year's resolution. You'll see it in
I go,
gyms too. You'll see the
oh
gyms
yeah,
flooded with you know, randoms you've never seen before if you're a usual. We'll call them casuals.
that's
The
right. Yeah,
casuals start coming in.
yeah. And they taper off in between the middle of like February to like middle of March starts tapering off
I
finally.
was gonna say about end of February,
Yep.
the resolution starts to die.
Yeah, and then by the time April rolls around, it's the normal folks again.
Yeah. So Arjun Singh has a question. How can I get an attitude as if I can make everything? I can make any app. How do you develop that sort of mentality?
Probably something very similar to that you have, Mitch, is that you can learn things very easily, and that's the key. Is like being able to learn and knowing how to learn is the key because I don't know everything about the new camera APIs. Heck, I haven't touched a camera in forever. If you ask me to write a camera app right now, I'm probably one of the least qualified people to do it. But you know what? I'll figure it out and I'll build you what you want because I'm going to go learn it. And it's not going to take me long because I know what I need to do and I know where the documentation's at. And I'm just going to start fiddling with it and I'm going to make it work. And so it's just kind of building that self confidence within yourself of saying, hey, I can do this and proving it to yourself time and time again.
Yeah, I like to call it getting comfortable with being uncomfortable
Hmm.
because I honestly, every time I go to make a new thing that I haven't touched before, I get the same feeling. It's the same feeling as when I
Yeah.
was first learning how to program. It's that same like sinking, hopeless
Yeah.
feeling. That's what it feels like. It's like, oh my God, I don't even know what I don't know. I don't. It's you get your hands on it and you're just like it feels hopeless.
Hmm.
So getting comfortable with that feeling and having, the confidence to just move the needle a little forward, move the
Yep.
needle a little forward. And pretty soon you're moving the needle one notch. And then suddenly one day you move it 10 notches and you're like,
Yep.
okay, okay. Next day you move it 20 notches and you're like, all right. Then at that point, when you see the jumps in progression, then you're heading on the right track.
Yeah. And you're building you're building the confidence the whole time. And after you do that, after you do that for a certain amount of time, like you know that you can probably build anything you want. If like, oh, I need to build a web page. Okay, it has to do X, Y, and Z. Sure, I'll figure it out. You just go off and start working on it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. All right. Um, so I'm gonna stop with the questions now,
Hmm.
and let's talk about some Android stuff. Let's
Yeah,
talk. So you've been around Android for a long time.
yeah,
You saw basically the birth of Android,
yeah.
and now you're seeing how it's evolving. Well, just before ask you specific questions, how do you feel about the current state of Android in general?
Frustrated.
Oh my god, I love the way you said that. It was like, it was so serious too. It wasn't like frustrated, ha 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 ha. It was like frustrated.
It's the truth. It is the truth. It's we've been dealing with a lot of problems in regards to, look at all the memes out there calling you out, Florian, and all your good memes.
He's a great meme maker. He has
He
a
is.
real talent.
He
Like,
does.
and he makes them to himself, like
I believe it.
from nothing.
And some of them are really good. Like they're like video memes and everything.
They're
I was like,
awesome.
wow, like that
Yeah.
took some time.
Actually, sorry, before you carry on, I want to give Florian a piece. I want to give him some input on one of his memes. I don't know why I didn't tell you when I saw it, but I thought of it. So you know that Matrix one when
Yes.
you have Neo behind the pole and he's like, oh, I remember what you said the bad guys were. You didn't say anything. That was a problem, I thought. So when he comes up from behind the pole, you should have like bug floating awkwardly on like right on their head, so that he's like shooting the bug. And like the next guy comes up and it's like bug awkwardly covering his face. And he shoots that bug. I think that would make the meme better. But anyway, my 2 cents.
Yeah.
So state of Android.
Yeah. So it's just been frustrating in regards to, if you look at, like, I have a screenshot. I don't think it's on this computer, from yesterday where my computer was just locked up, and I got 32 gigs of RAM. And the IDE, I'm typing in it, and it's like I'll type 5 characters, and it goes tick, 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 and I'm just like, oh, come on. And there's multiple things here because of the project size. It's because of perhaps things that we're doing inside of the layout editor. I'm not sure, but overall, it just gets very tiring to work on a platform for developing. Can be kind of painful, and we've all seen the error sometimes of you run a test, it says no test suite found, and you just kind of throw your hands in the air like, what do you mean no test suite found? And it's some obscure weird bug that pops up. Now, am I saying that this is worse than before? No, definitely not. I've just kind of come to a head personally on a lot of Android development. And I think it was Hans Dorfman. He put out a tweet recently, last week, I think it was, where he said he's written code for many years like I have, and he says he just is finding it very frustrating to do something simple in Android. And I've always felt that way as well. Even though there's documentation out there for something to be, how to do X, Y, and Z. It's just kind of various different components kind of coming together, crashing at the same time. It just made it frustrating in general. And I know it's kind of a generalization, but that's where I'm at.
No, I feel the same way. Obviously I haven't been around the block, but just as an educator, I'm always trying to learn as much as I can. And my job is a filter, right? Like I'm an information filter, and I'm trying to put the information out there that I think is worth knowing for people, and then showing them the right way to use it.
Yeah.
So, and it's because it's because they have so many problems that I have a job. Like
Yes.
they have so many things. It's just so many things. It's like, oh, new thing here, and they pump them all equally too. So you don't really know.
Are you talking about Google?
Yeah, Google, like, well, all the new components, like all the new shit that they always come up with. It's just like, what am I supposed to do it this way? Am I supposed to do it that way? I don't know. And it's hard. Like you got to read the documentation. Documentation, I think, is improving, but it used to be really terrible. At least 3 years ago when I started, I think it's improved vastly. But even still, so what? You have better examples. You still don't know what examples to look through. You're like, okay, I have a great example here, great example here. Which one do I?
Yeah. Which one do I do? Why? I
Yeah.
don't know.
Why? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's so many libraries out there, and I'll get people tweeting me all the time like, I want to build an app. Should I use, data binding? Should I use this thing? Should I use MVI? Should I use this? And my answer nowadays is like, just build the app. Like, however you know how to build it right now, just build it. And then like iterate from there. Because the solution that I have now may not be the right solution for you, or the solution that this person's using may not be the right solution. But the problem is everyone's super opinionated about, well, you have to use MVI and you have to use this different library or whatever. And that's just not the case. I've always been very pragmatic about it. Just like use the right thing. And it kind of goes back to those libraries things. There's so many new things. Like I haven't touched the majority of them. And it's just because I don't have time. What we have right now works. and we don't need to create more work for ourselves because we're trying to build features for a business.
Mm.
And we kind of have to understand what we're working on.
It's like what you said earlier. There's always gonna be someone smarter, and there's always gonna be a better way to do it.
Yep.
It's like just build it and iterate, and if there's a problem, solve it. If you know, stay practical, because otherwise you're gonna go around in circles all day. Like, I talk to a lot of students, obviously, because of the nature of what I do, and I can feel their anxiety when they ask me these questions, like, should I use this? Should I learn Kotlin first? Should I learn Java first? Should I learn Flutter? Should I use a recycler view? Should I use data binding? Do I need to know data binding? Do I need to know about async task? How do I thread? What's a service? What are Rx Java? And it's just like, settle down. Just one step at a time. Just try and build something.
Exactly.
Just like take a breath.
And that's the best piece of advice I always give everybody is just build whatever you're supposed to build. Like, don't worry about being perfect because that's going to be the enemy of you. Like, nothing's ever going to be perfect. You know, if you worry about it being perfect, it's never going to ship. Just ship it already, and then you learn from there.
Yeah. All right. So now that we've talked about the state of Android development, what's your favorite architecture? Is there a best architecture?
See, I see what you're doing. Seeding this very nicely there, man.
So you probably don't have a favorite.
I don't really have a favorite. No,
Yeah.
I've kind of been through them all. My favorite is the one that's not a big spaghetti mess, and the one that's not overly complicated. So that doesn't. So for some reason, you happen to have a very clean implementation of MVP, and it works for you and your team. Awesome, let's use that. If you have a very clean implementation of MVI, use that. Now, that said, I have been leaning towards more of a MVI type of approach, kind of a unidirectional data flow where the data is coming in, it's updating the view, and it's just kind of always going one way. And that kind of comes from my time working with React and JavaScript. When I did that, it felt very natural to me. And so seeing those same types of patterns in Android have been very welcoming.
So I think, what you just said there, that was an important point. What seemed natural to you? Because most people who watch my content know that I'm an MVVM guy. I like MVVM, but it's not because I think MVP or MVI or MVW or MVZ is any better or worse. It's just when I saw it and I used it, I thought, oh, I like this.
Yeah.
This feels nice to me, and it just felt right. And I talked about I talked about this in my last interview with Vasily too, because he's an MVP guy, mostly MVP.
Yeah.
And we talked about the same thing. He just felt like it was the natural. It was natural to him. That's what he liked to do. So I think that's an important point. Don't worry too much about what other people are doing, as long as, like you said, it's not spaghetti code. It's not overly complicated. It does what it's supposed to do, and you like it. Then that's probably the one that you should use.
Exactly. One of the things that's always been kind of a big thing for me is testability. For as long as I've been writing code, I've cared about testability, just because it gives me more confidence. And this kind of, I guess, it probably stems from reading the book "Working Effectively with Legacy Code" by Michael Feathers. And that was kind of the real eye-opening experience of me of like, all right, we have a statically typed language. I can't get this class under test. I need to change it. I don't know if I'm going to break 8,000 things. How do I do that? And when I read that, I felt like that book was written for me at that time when I first read it. Like, wow, I'm a consultant. I'm dealing with this legacy code. I have to make these changes. Like, I'm stressed out. It was like, oh, well, here's how I can introduce this shim, or here's how I can introduce this other type of test double, and here's what will get me. And so I felt like things like MVI made it easier for me to test different scenarios. Like, all right, in this case, we're going to have a screen that does this. In this case, it's going to be an error. In this case, it's going to be loading. And I want to make sure that these proper events or things kind of pop up and are shown. But then again, it always kind of comes back to like, all right, you've tested that component and you've done it in isolation without any of the Android import statements inside of that code, but you still have to test your app with those things running, because what ultimately matters is what the user sees at the end of the day. And it doesn't matter if you've tested all of your underlying architecture correctly. If you haven't wired it all together correctly at the top layer, the customer doesn't care because the app just doesn't work. So you still have to do, functional system testing, which is very important in my opinion too.
So this is actually great. You transitioned into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which was unit testing. Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you, how important do you think unit testing is? But I think you already answered that. It's very important.
Yeah, very important. Yeah. And so, but I'm leaning even more towards, and I think Kaushik and I talked about this in the podcast, more towards End-to-end testing. Just I want to make sure the app does exactly what it's supposed to do. And this is something actually that I'm proud of the team over at American Express, which is one of my clients. They do very, very well. Is end-to-end testing, and it's kind of built into the culture there. If you push something up with a view or whatever, and there's no test there, your PR is immediately the first comment is going to be, "Is there a test for this?" Because we want to make sure that we don't like ruin the end user experience, because that's ultimately what matters. Because if I click a button and the app crashes, or I click a button and it doesn't do anything, well, that's just a terrible user experience. And then before you know it, all these one-star reviews are going to be coming in, especially if that's a user flow that's early on in your application's journey.
Can you explain end-to-end testing?
Yeah, so in this case, end-to-end would be, it's gonna be an espresso test for Android, and you're gonna want to be able to test from end to end, from the time the user clicks the button, it's gonna make an API request, it's gonna get back some JSON data or whatever your data format is, and it's gonna kind of run through the entire stack. It's your application running as it should run in the end user's hand. So end-to-end testing. The problem with this is making it hermetic, meaning that we can repeat this over and over and over without any weird side effects happening. And so Test Orchestrator came out. That's a useful utility that kind of runs tests sort of in isolation, and it kind of cleans up after each other. But the real problem is like mocking out like the API. Like, how do I do that? Like, do I have a test server that has to be running? Well, what happens if I have a network problem? Well, then my tests are going to fail and those are unreliable. And so you kind of have to eventually either mock out the lower level using something like, mock web server, or some other type of mocking utility. You can use something like WireMock, which acts as its own little web server that runs in your test environment. And when you request URL, it gives you back a piece of JSON that you request. And
That's cool. I
there's
didn't
a lot
know
of
that.
people.
I didn't know that existed. That's really cool.
Yeah, so you can fire up these tests in, Firebase Test Lab or Circle CI or wherever you're running at Nevercode or wherever you're running these different things. Um, and then they can run in isolation, and you don't have to worry about your server being up and running. You can say, hey, in this scenario, when I request this URL with this parameter, I want you to throw a 401 error. And so 401 unauthorized, then your app responds correctly. Hey, we're going to show a dialog that says, sorry, you're unauthorized or whatever, or you've been logged out.
So with WireMock, you can simulate bad network conditions also?
What do you mean by bad network conditions? Can you clarify?
A delay, a network delay.
Delay. I'm not sure if you can. I'd have to double check if you can do a delay. All the stuff I work on is mainly focused on like, all right, here's the type of response we're going to get. It's going to be a successful response. Here's what the success looks like. Here's what a failure response looks like. And then if the network's down, we handle that in another part of the application of like some type of handler. Hey, we got back a HTTP exception of, 500, 401, 400, whatever. And then we handle that, consistently all throughout the app.
Okay, gotcha. Might look into that. Yeah, my next question was going to be, what do you think is the most important type of testing, whether it's unit testing or testing with Espresso CUI or CUI testing? So obviously, you think Espresso is the most important type of testing. So you can do end-to-end testing.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing I like people to think about is, let's say you join a new company tomorrow. They have no unit tests, and you're required to change a piece of the functionality that's payment processing for this e-commerce app, and there's no test for it. You're going to be really paranoid that you broke something. And so what's the best way to do that? Put an espresso test around it, because you're exercising the entire app. Hopefully you have a staging server, if you can't get something like WireMock set up in time, that you can actually run these against a different environment. But that will give you the confidence to say, hey, look, I know I made this change. I know when I press these few buttons, we can add something to the cart and we can check out. Everything still works. And in fact, anytime I go to a client and they don't have any unit tests, the first thing I do is I set up a suite of 5 or 10 tests. The first one is just a launch test. Does the app actually launch? Which we've all seen that. Hey, I made a change. It compiles. Everything's good. And you launch it, and there's a no pointer exception for whatever reason.
Mm.
The next one is like, can I log into the app? And just those 2 tests alone catch a ton of simple errors that we forget to catch just in manual development.
That's good. That's a really good principle, because you can't foresee everything, and a little change here could have a big impact. You start the app and null pointer, and you're like,
Yep.
what? Yeah. So that's a good principle, I guess. Start with whatever. Have a set number of tests that you run regardless. Logging in, starting the app, opening the cart. Doing a
simple
base
flows.
checkout. Yeah, whatever. Cool. That's a good idea. So you mentioned Firebase Test Lab. Do you use Firebase a lot, and do you use it in like production freelance projects?
Production freelance projects, no, other than just some of the config stuff. So I've had clients that use it for testing. I've had clients that use it for analytics. So kind of depends on the client what they want to use it for.
But I mean, you pretty much have to use Firebase for push notifications now, right? You got to use
Yes.
FVM.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you do you because I don't even know if you can still use GCM like
I don't
Google Cloud Messaging
think I don't think you can sign up for it anymore or anything like that. So it's all through Firebase. Yeah.
through Firebase. So you do
Yeah.
that. So that's probably one of you use uh, Crashlytics or Crash Reporting, whatever they call. I think it's Crashlytics they call it now.
Mm-hmm.
Test Lab and Firebase push
Cloud
notification.
messaging. Yeah. And then of course the what's it called? The config stuff. Where you can like do
Oh
A/B
yeah,
testing.
remote config.
Yeah. Yeah. Remote config. That's what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, cool. So why don't you use a Firestore or the Firebase database or authentication in your production apps?
Usually for the clients that have been bringing me on lately, there's been no need. Usually authentication's handled by themselves through their own implementation, especially large Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies. Of course, they have their own integrations and their own systems on the back end, their own API, their own teams that handle that. So you're going to use their stuff. You're not going to use, Firestore or anything like that or authentication. The times that I have seen folks use that is when it's a startup and we need to get going quickly. We need some type of authentication. How can we do it without spending a lot of time doing it? Then that's that point where you can start evaluating, hey, is Firestore the right thing for me or is it not? Or kind of weigh your options of what you're trying to do at the end of the day.
What do you see as kind of the pros or the cons of using Firestore as opposed to something more traditional like putting up a server and interacting with the REST API?
Well, I think the benefits easily are just way to, development and management. I mean, if you're going to develop that yourself, you have to manage that code. You have to write that code. If it's going to be a server, you got to make sure it's tested correctly. You have to make sure that, you have someone to help with the DevOps of that. Even if it's on Heroku where you can just push up something pretty easily, you still need to manage that yourself. So if you can get around that and launch quicker with something like Firebase, then you can use that as long as it's going to meet your needs as a company.
Right. All right. You are a Google development expert.
Developer, yeah. Mhm. Correct.
In Android.
Yes.
Was that difficult to do? And are you allowed to talk about the process of how all that kind of works?
I can talk about mine because mine is very different than I think most people than how it happens now or has happened in general. Um, so I became a GDE in 2015, I believe it was, and it's I'm gonna give all credit where credit's due, and that's due to Mike Wolfson, who was one of the original GDEs. I think he's still a GDE now, and I lived in Phoenix at the time and was doing Fragmented. I was writing blogs, I was doing speaking, and I was running the Phoenix Android Google Developer Group with Mike. And Mike just says one day, he's like, "Hey, I nominated you to be a GDE," and I was like, "Oh, what?" And he goes, "Yeah, I nominated you." He's like, "You put in the work. You've done a lot of stuff. It's like you deserve it. You know what you're doing. You know what you're talking about. So I nominated you." And I was like, "Okay, well, what do I have to do?" And at that time, it was just I had to kind of put together a list of the things I've done, and this is before a formalized process was kind of erected, I guess you would say. And so I kind of sent that over to the folks at Google, and then I had a couple of interviews with the folks at Google, with some Googlers, and then randomly a few weeks later, I was like, "Hey, Don, we've been approved as a GDE." And then at that point forward, it's just kind of I've maintained it just through community interactions and so forth.
So what was the interviews like when you talking to these Googlers? What kind of was it? It wasn't tech. It was probably semi-technical, I would assume, right? Like they
Yeah.
asked you some questions just to see if you actually know how to do the things that you said you did on your resume.
Yeah, so this is 2015. A lot of things are different back then than they are now. So your questions would be vastly different now. But yeah, it was very. It was very technical. It's like, all right, well, if you want to build an app that does, let's use a shopping app. You want to build a shopping app, and what kind of things are you going to need to do? It's like, okay, I'm going to need
Walk
to.
through it, basically.
Yeah, how would you build that? And it was just like, okay, I would just build it with this retrofit, and I would build it with Arch Java, and I would have this, and I'd probably use this pattern or whatever, and I might approach it from this aspect, and I'd even bring up things we've brought up before, such as I would have a conversation with the business owner of like, hey, what's your budget? What are you looking to do? and kind of figure out where they're at so I can see how much development time we're going to have. So, hey, okay, cool. We have extra development time. Let's build it with this pattern. If we don't, let's just kind of get something quick out, still use these tools and these implementations. And then the conversation would be kind of driven from there of like, all right, well, assuming you chose option B, explain to me what you would do then. And just kind of walk through it. Okay, well, explain to me this library. What does that library do? And we kind of just had a long kind of like natural progression conversation about technology and implementations and then so forth. And of course they do the research on you to make sure that you're not some, dolt out there that doesn't know what they're
Right.
doing. So you definitely do have to be active in the community a significant amount. You can't just be someone who's just under a rock all the time, be like, hey, I know everything and I should be a GDE.
Quick hands. I know
Yeah,
everything.
jazz
Right.
hands.
Yeah, they have access to Google, so they're
Yeah.
gonna look you
Yeah.
up. Cool. Look, I was thinking about becoming one, but I don't do freelancing, so I don't really see a lot of utility for me. Because I'm assuming the biggest sort of utility is going to be your ability to get clients. You know, it's kind of like, hey, look at my certificate of knowledge, sort of thing, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if it's ever impacted my ability to get clients. I have no idea. To be honest, I don't know. It's definitely something that's helped my own personal brand. I know that just from being a GDE. But then again, I also do a lot of other things out there in the community with the podcast and blogs and so forth and speaking. So it's hard to say if one thing is impacting more than the other, but it definitely does help the personal brand.
Yeah, how popular is your podcast? Do you have access to analytics and things like that? Because I know my podcast I just host on Blueberry or whatever it's called, and it's on Spotify, and I
Mhm.
don't really see a way to look at analytics or anything like that. So, where do you know how well it's doing? I mean, I know how well it's doing because I talk to everybody and everybody knows about it.
Mhm.
So it's obviously very popular. It's probably the most popular Android podcast out there. It's the only
Mhm.
technical one, anyway. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, how do you know if it's going? How well is it going? Is my
It's
question.
going very well. It's with podcast analytics, it's hard to say like what well really is. I mean, unless you're at the level of like Joe Rogan and you're pulling in $50 million a year. I mean, none of us are doing that by any stretch of the imagination. And it's all based on like download numbers, and download numbers are kind of hard thing to track. And the real difficult thing about podcasts is Apple has a stranglehold on it, and because they were the first ones to really kind of centralize it, and so there's no centralized location for podcast reporting. It's just like, okay, someone downloaded the file, and that's all the information that we really have. But based upon that, we're doing very well. I'm not going to get into the numbers because we are with a network, and I'm not sure of what we can share beyond our
Yeah,
network.
no worries.
But we're doing very well, and we're always looking for any way that we can improve. If anybody has any ideas, feel free to send Kaushik and I a tweet or an email from our website at fragmentedpodcast.com. If you have any topics, requests, anything like that, feel free to send them over. We're always open to discussions.
Something I really like about it is you guys get very technical sometimes. Like like you'll go as far as talking about the structure of the class that you're talking about. Like you'll say,
Mhm.
your constructor looks like this. You're passing this through the constructor. Then you have a method that does this and it's returning this. I like that because in my head I'm picturing it as I'm
Mhm.
listening, and and there's nowhere else that does that. And I know personally, a lot of people have asked me if I could just record the audio for some of my tutorials or
Yeah.
examples, just because they just want to listen to me. And I thought about that a few times, and I've been back and forth about it. I think I would have to tailor it specifically for audio. So it's definitely something that I might do in the future, and I enjoy it from your podcast whenever you guys get like real technical. I like that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that input because Couch and I have a lot of discussions offline if that's something that we want to, how deep we want to go, and that's kind of a conversation we'll have beforehand before we hit the record button of like, all right, look, this is going to get real technical, really into the weeds. Like we
Into the
try to,
weeds. That's what you always say. Yeah.
yeah, we try to walk a fine line of not being too overly technical, where it's like, okay, this is mundane. I want to turn this off. Uh, so it's a hard thing to do because talking about code at some level is kind of boring. But like as you said, sometimes you're explaining something, you have to kind of say, "Hey, here's the constructor. It's going to be of this type. It's going to be nullable." And like you said, you're naturally picturing this progression in your head. Um, so it's something we've definitely struggled with over time. But for your stuff, I think you might want to just giving it a shot with what you have now and just extracting the audio track out of it. And if you don't have the time for it, hire someone else out. I mean, that's what we do for some of the fragmented stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. Honestly, it's very high in my priority list, I guess. And as soon as I get some free time, I guess you would say, just look at a video, extract the audio, say here's where you can get the audio, and just see how people respond. And it's like you said, like you've been saying throughout the podcast, take the first step, see how it works, and then iterate. And if people want it to be improved in whatever way, then I can look at that.
Yeah, that's what happened with us with our YouTube channel. If you go to Fragmented Podcast on YouTube, or you just Google, look on YouTube for it, you'll see it's just kind of like a little audiogram with an image that sits there, and it's the podcast. And I tried doing that myself. I just was like, wow, this is way too much time intensive. I ended up finding someone on Upwork that could do it for us. It was relatively cheap, and so I ended up paying him every week. And for a while, it was like, hey, new episode would come out, I'd shoot him an email. And even then, I started forgetting to do that. And so eventually, I just went to Zapier and set up a couple of Zapier automations that says anytime there's a new post on Simplecast, which is the host that we use, it automatically posts it to our WordPress site. And then a few minutes later, we have another Zapier API check that hits our website to say, hey, is there a new a new podcast out? And then we email our video guy with that link. It's all automated with the link to all the files, and then he gets everything, and then he processes it, and he has access to our YouTube, and then he just uploads it. And so we just worry about making content now, and then it shows up, and then
Press end.
A day later, it just kind of shows up on YouTube, and he sends us a message on our chat, and he's like, hey, it's up. We're like, cool, thanks.
Cool.
And we don't have to worry about it.
Cool. Yeah, these are things that will definitely come in time for me, because right now I do everything myself pretty much. But in time, I'm just starting to be able to support myself. So
that's good. That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good. It's great because like last year I did all Pluralsight. Like basically, I don't know, 90% of my income was Pluralsight. I did like 8 or 9 Pluralsight courses, and then this year I decided no more Pluralsight. I'm going to stop building their platform. I'm going to try and build my platform. And it's going really well. It's exceeding my expectations. I thought it was going to take a year or two before I was making the sort of income that I was making from Pluralsight, but it's quickly approaching. So that's
good. Congratulations.
Good. Yeah, it feels good to be able to support yourself and not be dependent on, because really I was an employee. Like
you are.
Yeah. That's what I was. It's a Pluralsight. I'm basically an employee, and I don't want to be an employee.
Yeah. So I was actually a previous Pluralsight instructor as well, but I was actually grandfathered in from another platform. So they had acquired TechPub years ago, and I had built all of TechPub's Android video courses, and they acquired TechPub, and I just kind of onboarded with Pluralsight, and I got to the same thing. And that's kind of actually how Caster got here. I was like, all right, well, I don't want to be at their whim and their mercy of how they want to develop things. I want to do it my own way, and Caster kind of came out of that.
I've watched some Caster courses. Actually, I think I watched one of maybe the first ones you ever did on Caster, and I watched one of the later ones, and there's a significant skill difference that I thought I saw. Like I don't even know what the time difference between the two were, but like I watched the first one and I thought sometimes I was like, no, I didn't like the way you explained that, and then I watched the newer ones and I was like, damn, this is a different guy. Your voice has changed. Your flow has changed.
Yes, definitely.
Everything was just like, wow. And actually, do you want to talk a little bit about that, about your skills as a video producer?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we try to do at Caster is to value the viewer's time as much as possible. I can't tell you how many times all of us have Googled something, landed up on a random video on a website, YouTube, whatever, and said, all right, this thing's talking about how to implement a media player. And you're like, okay. And you're scrubbing through it, and there's this there's the code on the screen, and there's like a picture of some guy in the corner smoking a cigarette, like hanging out, talking about code, and nothing's happening. And you're just kind of using the scrubber, and you're scrubbing through, like, where does this start? And then finally, a minute or two later, you see it and you watch, you're like, this isn't what I was looking for. And you go back out of it. And so what I've always aimed at is like, all right, if we're going to do a video, we're going to explain one thing in that video. And that's what we're going to talk about in that one short thing. And we're just going to get right into it. We'll explain everything that's needed. Anything that's fluff, we're going to cut out. And so that's why some of the videos are very, very short. Some of them are very, very fast. We may talk about it and the code is being typed really fast. And some people get kind of upset, like, the code's going too fast. And then I'll reply to them on our support emails like, well, I understand that, but just press pause. And you can read the code right there and then rewind it. That's the beautiful thing about video.
Yeah, like you can rewatch it. I feel the same way. Like it's better to be efficient, I think, because if you're efficient, you're catering to everybody. If you're inefficient, you're catering to only the people who want you to be inefficient.
Yeah.
Like
you're catering to yourself.
Yeah, because you forcing people to scrub through, basically. Some people will, some people won't, but there's you're forcing someone to do something. Pausing is easier, or restarting is easier than searching for the thing, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard. Like you have to learn. I think learning the tools is, as with anything, just like Android Studio, you got to learn the shortcuts. Once you learn the shortcuts, you can start flying around the IDE. The same thing goes with video tools or audio tools. As soon as you learn those shortcuts, then you can really start flying around those things and learn how to use it to your advantage. And then just also like how you're going to record. Are you going to do it all in one take? Are you going to record in 15-second segments? Or are you going to record one little thing, take a 30-second break, kind of take a deep breath, hop back into it and edit it out in post? It all kind of depends on your style.
What is your style when you're recording a course? Like, do you script the whole thing? Tell me as much as you want. I want to know as much as possible about your process, your course development process, and then also your when you're actually filming.
Yeah, so course development depends. I've kind of gone all different realms. I've tried doing it, total Wild West shoot 'em up style, like just off the cuff.
YOLO.
Yeah, it never works. Like every time I get like 8 minutes into a video, I'd totally screw it up, and then I'd forget where to restart. And it was just I'd spend hours developing a 10-minute video, and I kind of scrapped that for many years, and I went into full script mode, where I would write every single word. The beautiful thing about that is I call that TDD for videos, because you have to think out the example, you've got to write it out, then you've got to script it, and I'd script it into like a document. And then what I'd do is I'd actually record the actual script first in audio, and then I'd pull it into the video editor and say, all right, now first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it dontest.kt. And then I'd pause it and I'd go record that video, drop it in, make it fit within that, that audio. And I'd keep doing that for the entire segment if it's 5 minutes long. And what I would have at the end is a perfectly executed video of like, when I'm done, I'm done. There's nothing else to do about it. It's already been done. I don't need to edit anything else. And so that was a kind of TDD. Like I knew it was perfect. And then I've kind of regressed now back to a more taking breaks, rehearsing a little bit, and then just kind of speaking slowly and say, all right, here's what we're going to talk about. And I think this is more of an experience thing once you get used to it. And you've done many videos. So
your progression is exactly the same as my progression.
Yeah.
Like identical. It's funny.
So now I'll speak slowly. I'll explain a concept. Then I'll like, okay, all right, cool. There's that piece. Now all right, I'm going to talk about the if statement next. Then I'll wait a second. And I know when I'm leaving that blank space inside of the recording, for those that have done audio and video development, you'll see the waveform for the audio is just flat. And so there's an empty space there you need to cut out when you're editing. And so that's what I'll do. I'll just kind of take a break and then record again. And then in post-production, just come back through, whack, 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 and just get everything out through Ripple Delete.
Yep. That's mine is the same, exactly the same. I started Wild West style. Actually, when I first started making videos, I didn't even know that you could cut things. So I literally, if you watch my first videos, it sounds like I'm nervous, which I am, but it sounds so rushed because I didn't have a script. I didn't know you could edit. So I literally did the whole thing in one take. Nothing, just like, okay, now we're gonna do this, and then next we're gonna do this, and I didn't stop. Video done, post. And then some of them are like 10-minute videos. So like you can imagine the amount of times that I had to redo that for a little screw up somewhere.
Oh yeah, I had one RX Java video I put out early on in Caster's history. It took me 8 hours to do. I think it was 12 or 14 minutes long. It took me 8 hours to develop it. I mean, you've dealt with this too. It's just those are, at the end of the day, just like you take your headphones off and you walk out of your home office or your office. You're like, oh, I'm glad that one's done. That was a pain.
Oh yeah, definitely had those. And then I learned how to edit. So when I started working with Pluralsight, everything had to be perfect. So I started scripting. I'd write 80-page scripts, the whole thing, and I would actually record the audio separate from the video.
Yep.
So I would just sit there and I'd read the script one day. I'd read the whole thing, and have all the audio ready. And then I would record the video with no audio, obviously. And then I just paste one on top of the other, cut it where I needed to be. And that's not the answer, in my opinion. It's it's a really fine tuned product. I guess there's no mistakes, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's too robotic. It's which is why you've progressed after that too, to a more hybrid way, where now for me, I have a structure. I have lectures ready that I know I'm like, this is what's going to be covered in this lecture. This is what's going to be covered in this lecture. And then I just have bullet points, and I just kind of, before I film the video, I look at it. I'm like, okay, that. Okay. And then I go, and it's just more, it's more natural, but it's also structured. And to fix something, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I definitely like how it feels more natural, because I can talk about, if I'm in the middle of a concept and something hits me like, oh, hey, and by the way, if you also do this, this would make sense. And sometimes you're going to do it this way. It just feels more conversational. And like, I'm kind of just sitting there showing you something cool inside of the code, as compared to when you said it's scripted, it almost feels very sterile. Like, here's how it is, and we're done.
Yeah.
And I know that I think you talked to John Somnez, and you were on his show, right?
Long, maybe 2 years ago, maybe even 3. I don't even know. 2 for sure.
Yeah. So I've known John for many years, and John and Corey House, and all Pluralsight instructors, Dan Wallin, all those guys, and they've all kind of come to the conclusion of the same thing that we're talking about here, is they'll kind of just do it as a hybrid approach. And even John, I've talked to him about how he put out so many courses. His big thing was like, I would just do it hybrid, and then he hired someone, and he had a specific system of when he would mess up. He would just do something, a double clap or whatever, and say where to go back and edit. And then the editor would come back through and do all the edits for him. And he wouldn't have to even edit himself anymore. He'd just record it, send the file off, and he was done.
John's like a productivity mutant. He's like, he gets shit done. Like I don't know. I don't know what drives him. Something special, that's for sure. He reminds me of David Goggins. You know who David Goggins is?
Love Goggins.
I love Goggins too. I just read his book.
He's so good. Did you do the
Audible animal one? Yeah, I read the Audible one.
That's the best one. Yeah, because it's such. If folks are listening, if listen to that book,
I'll write it in chat.
Yeah, it's Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, but the Audible version is awesome because it's narrated by not him, but another guy. But Goggins is in the studio with him, and at the end of every chapter, Goggins hops in and like adds all these anecdotes and additional content in there, which was just amazing.
It's awesome. Like I almost didn't get it because I've read a lot of self-help books, and not that there's anything wrong with self-help books. I loved them, but I'm sort of over them. Like I'm over the self-help hump. I'm good.
You're good now, Mitch. I could tell.
Oh, thanks.
I'm just kidding.
Thanks. But I mean, they all say the same kind of thing, right? Like it's like, I don't know. It's repetitive, I guess is what I'm saying. And I was nervous to get this David Goggins one because it seemed like a self-help book, but it's really not. It's something way more. It like, you listen to this guy and you're like, you're a fucking animal. Like I think about like, I don't want to do something. I'm like, what would David Goggins do?
What would Goggins do? Yeah.
What would Goggins do?
That's what I say at the gym all the time. I'm like, WWGD. I'm like, what would Goggins do? And everyone knows Goggins at the gym I go to. And they're like, oh, yep, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to my brother about it yesterday too. I told him to buy the book. He read it or he listened to it too. And he's like, God damn it. What? And we were eating lunch yesterday and we were talking about the same thing. He's like, I was going to go for a run. Didn't want to. And I said to myself, what would Goggins do? He'd probably run 20 miles.
Yeah.
He was planning to run 2. He'd run 20 just because.
Yeah. I came away with a whole new respect for ultra runners after that. And it's not an ultra runner book for folks who are listening. It's not that way. He just talks about what he did in ultra running. And I came away with a whole new respect for those folks after learning the physical demands of
it's mental toughness. It's like, well, it's physical, obviously, but it's like the mental thing too. It's everything. Yeah. They're a special type of human, those ultra people.
They are.
I was gonna say something. Now I totally forget. Okay, let's talk about what do you think about online resources? Do you think online is better than learning with books? Do you think it's still worth going to school as a new person just learning to program, going to college for computer science? Do you think it's more effective to learn online? Do you think it's more effective to learn with books? What are your thoughts on that category?
I'm a huge fan of books in general. At any given time, I'm reading. I always have a physical book on me. I have books on my Kindle at all times with me, and I'm listening to 1 to 5 or 10 different audiobooks at any given time. So yes, I do think physical books have a lot of value. I feel like we consume them in a different way. It's almost like if you're truly reading the physical book, you'll, I have an opinion, you'll grasp more of the content. Um, but that's me. In regards to online resources and learning to code and everything, is college the right way to go? I've been on the fence of this for a while. You've seen Gary Vee talk about this, and James Altucher, and a bunch of folks talk about that. College isn't necessary, and I've kind of said, yeah, I kind of agree with that at some level, that it's not necessary. In fact, the only reason I have a software engineering degree is because I wanted the piece of paper. I already knew how to do it. I had went to the bookstore, like I said earlier. I figured out how to do this stuff. I taught myself everything. By the time I was in school, I just went to class just to get the piece of paper. And when I, in fact, with on top of public speaking and doing stuff out there in the community, I was actually able to skip 4 classes in my college degree. I was able to say I already have experience, improve the experience, and they just wrote the credits off for me. Um, so it's hard to say. Now, for programming, you could definitely do it without having a degree. I don't know how much it's going to matter in corporate America anymore going forward. It may matter a little bit. It depends on the position you're in. It depends on how well you're known. If you're out there and you're in the open source community, you're self-taught and you're providing value to people, people are going to notice, especially if you're out there speaking and marketing yourself as well. If you're living in a cave and no one knows who you are and you're self-taught and no one knows that, it's going to be hard to go out there and find a job because there's no proof. And that's kind of what a degree sometimes provides, is this validity of like, hey, Don does know what he says he knows because he got a degree. Um, where you can learn, like you said, YouTube, wherever else you're going to find that information is kind of up to you. There's so many different resources out there that you could use.
Yeah. So to kind of break all that down and summarize what you said a lot of really great things. It sounds like find whatever way. So, okay. Number one is you don't need school. You definitely don't need it, but it might help you. It might help you get a job for
Mhm.
sure. Then number two is figure out so number two is what way do you prefer to learn? If you need a teacher to learn, then that you got to go to school. If you don't, look at books or look at online learning. So whether it's YouTube, online places like my website, caster.io,
Mhm.
Pluralsight, yeah, Udemy, doesn't matter. Fine. I think at the end of the day, if you're going to go with the online learning route, you want to find people, instructors who cater to the way you like to be taught.
Mhm.
Because there's lots of different teaching styles out there. Some people, it's different. You got to experiment and go and find whatever is going to work for you.
Mhm.
So there's not a best way, but at the end of the day, I think school is very expensive, very very expensive, insanely expensive compared to teaching yourself.
Indeed.
Like I think they're criminals personally. Like when you really look at the cost, at least for computer programming and computer science, because that stuff is freely available online, if not for very small amounts of money. You're probably going to look at 2% of the cost to get a university level education.
Yeah, and I think it's something important too. Like if you're going to be self-taught, but you still want a degree, that's okay too. That's the situation I'm in. If you're in that situation, don't be afraid to look at a small tech college or a smaller college that's going to give you your degree that's local to you. That's okay too. Like I have a degree from a tech college in Arizona that's no name. Like no one really knows of it at all. And that's okay. I'm doing fine. I still have a degree. So don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the only way anyone's ever going to see that degree is on your LinkedIn profile, and it's going to say software engineer, went to
Hmm.
school here. No one cares where. It's
Yep.
just that you have a software engineering degree. That's it.
Yep. That's it.
There was one more thing I wanted to say, but I think it's gone. That thought is
It's
that thought is now
fast.
gone. um, oh damn it! It was something good. I think. Oh well, it's gone. Let it go.
It'll come back. Don't worry.
Probably. So let's see. I think we've talked about pretty much all the things. Oh, the thing. It's on the tip of my. I don't remember. Damn it. Yeah. Well. Okay. I think we've talked about all the things that I wanted to talk about. Yeah. I don't know. Is there anything that you wanna talk about that you got going on in your life right now that you want to tell the audience to go check out? Anything that you feel all of these fine people might benefit from, just general knowledge. Do you have anything that you want to finish up with?
The only thing I can share out there is just, I think the one thing that I've learned over the years that's the most important, and this goes into any aspect of any part of your life, is just learn how to learn. Know how to learn. Like, that's important, because if you today want to learn how to program Flutter, you can go learn it. If you want to learn how to become a cook, you know how to do that. Each person learns differently. Some people are visually, some people are audibly, some people have to do it. Figure out what works best for you, experiment and figure that out, and kind of create your own system around it. Because as soon as you have that system, it's going to be easy for you to say, hey, I want to learn how to be a cabinet maker. I want to learn how to be a cook. You automatically know, like, all right, I know that I learned visually and by doing. Okay, I'm going to go watch some YouTube videos. I'm going to pause it, and I'm going to make this pasta thing that I saw on YouTube, and I'm going to know how to make it now. So just know how to learn. It's going to help push you forward. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Yep. And just so all you guys know, I have all of Don's, I guess, most popular links in the description of this video. He got his Twitter, his website, caster.io, Fragmented podcast. Just in case none of you know and you haven't been listening, maybe you're just watching now, he's probably the most popular Android podcast in existence today. It's called Fragmented. You can go to fragmentedpodcast.com to watch it. It gets very technical, which I really like. There's nothing else out there like that. So I highly recommend checking out his podcast. It's on Spotify, the Apple thing, all the things. You can find the podcast if you want to listen to the podcast, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, and thanks, Don. This was a lot of fun. I wish I could do this for a living, but unfortunately, I have to do other things.
Well, thank you for having me on, Mitch. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thanks again. Bye.